That night, when Elvis Presley walked onto the stage, there was an 8-year-old boy in the audience who was dying. What happened next would change everything we thought we knew about the king of rock and roll, and prove that sometimes the most powerful performance isn't about the music at all. It was July 15, 1975, at the International Hotel in Las Vegas. Elvis was in the middle of his most successful comeback period, selling out every show, breaking attendance records night after night. The glittering jumpsuit, the commanding voice, the magnetic presence that could make 2,000 people feel like they were the only person in the room. But this particular evening would become the night that revealed the true heart of Elvis Aaron Presley. The boy's name was Tommy Harrison. 8 years old, barely weighing 50 pounds, with leukemia that doctors said would take his life before his 9th birthday. His parents, Martha and Jim, had spent their life savings to bring him to Las Vegas for one last wish. Tommy had heard Elvis on the radio every day during his treatments, and somehow, those songs had become his lifeline. His mother would later say that Elvis's voice was the only thing that could make her son smile during the worst days of chemotherapy. They sat in the front row, Tommy wearing his favorite baseball cap to hide the hair loss from treatment, clutching a handmade sign that read, "Elvis, you're my hero." His parents had no idea if Elvis would even notice them in the crowd, but they had to try. They had to give their son this one moment of pure joy before time ran out. The show began like any other Elvis concert. The lights dimmed, the anticipation built, and then suddenly, the king himself appeared in that iconic white jumpsuit studded with gems that caught the stage lights like stars. The crowd erupted as Elvis launched into CC Rider, his voice as powerful and smooth as velvet. Everything was going exactly as it always did. But then something happened that nobody, not even Elvis's closest associates, had ever witnessed before. Elvis was halfway through "Love Me Tender" when he stopped singing mid-sentence. The entire venue fell into an eerie, complete silence. 2,000 people held their breath as Elvis stepped away from the microphone, his eyes fixed on something in the front row. The backup singers kept humming softly, uncertain whether to continue or stop. The musicians looked at each other in confusion. In 40 years of performing, Elvis had never stopped a song in the middle like this. He had seen Tommy. The 8-year-old boy wasn't clapping or cheering like the rest of the audience. He was just sitting there, pale and thin, but with eyes that sparkled with pure admiration. His little hands were pressed together as if he was praying, and tears were streaming down his face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of overwhelming joy at finally seeing his hero in person. Elvis walked to the edge of the stage, still silent, and gestured for security to bring the boy up. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Tommy's parents helped their frail son climb the steps to the stage. Nobody knew what was happening. This wasn't part of the show. This wasn't planned. This was Elvis breaking every rule of show business for a reason nobody yet understood. But what Elvis did next would shock everyone in that room and create a moment that would be talked about for decades. When Tommy reached the stage, Elvis knelt down to the boy's eye level, completely ignoring the 2,000 people watching them. He took off his iconic sunglasses and looked directly into Tommy's eyes. The silence in the room was so complete you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "What's your name, son?" Elvis asked softly, his voice carrying through the venue's sound system. "Tommy," the boy whispered, barely audible even with the microphone nearby. "Well, Tommy, I hear you've been fighting real hard. Your mom told my people backstage about what you're going through." Elvis's voice cracked slightly. "I want you to know something. You're braver than any man I've ever met." Tommy started crying harder, but they were still tears of joy. He couldn't believe Elvis Presley was talking to him, kneeling with him, treating him like the most important person in the world. Then Elvis did something that made the entire audience gasp. He took off his signature scarf, the blue silk one he wore in every show, and gently tied it around Tommy's neck. "This scarf has been with me through every performance for the last 3 years, Elvis said, his voice now barely containing his own emotions. "I want you to have it. And I want you to remember something every time you look at it. You're not just fighting for yourself, Tommy. You're fighting for everyone who's ever felt scared, everyone who's ever felt alone, everyone who's ever needed to believe that miracles can happen. At this point, backstage, Elvis's manager Colonel Parker was frantically trying to figure out what was happening. This wasn't in any script. This wasn't planned. But Elvis was about to do something that would define his legacy more than any #1 hit ever could. Elvis stood up and walked to the piano. He sat down, placed Tommy on the bench beside him, and began to play the opening chords of "He Touched Me." But this time, it wasn't a performance. It was a prayer, a conversation between a man at the height of his fame and a boy fighting for his life. As Elvis sang, something magical happened. Tommy began to sing along, his weak voice mixing with Elvis's powerful vocals. The boy knew every word. The audience, still in stunned silence, began to realize they were witnessing something far more important than any concert. They were witnessing pure, unconditional love between two human beings. "He touched me, oh he touched me, and oh the joy that floods my soul," they sang together, Tommy's voice growing stronger with each word. The dying boy and the king of rock and roll, connected by music, by faith, by something that transcended the stage and the lights and the fame. When the song ended, Elvis didn't let Tommy return to his seat. Instead, he kept the boy with him for the rest of the show. Tommy sat on a chair right beside the piano, wearing Elvis's scarf, watching his hero perform song after song. Every few minutes, Elvis would look over at Tommy and wink, or reach over to squeeze his shoulder. The audience had never seen anything like it. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was witnessing the heart of a man who had everything in the world, choosing to share it with someone who had almost nothing left. What happened during the final song would leave everyone in tears and cement this moment as the most powerful in Elvis's entire career. For the encore, Elvis always performed "Can't Help Falling in Love." But this time, he called Tommy over to the microphone. The 8-year-old boy, still wearing Elvis's blue scarf, stood beside the king as they began the final song together. "Wise men say, only fools rush in," Elvis sang, and then he held the microphone toward Tommy. "But I can't help falling in love with you," Tommy sang back, his voice pure and clear despite his illness. The entire audience rose to their feet. 2,000 people began singing along, their voices joining with Elvis and Tommy in a moment of pure unity. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. People were openly sobbing, not from sadness, but from witnessing something beautiful and real in a world that often felt fake and distant. Elvis's band members were crying. The backup singers had tears streaming down their faces. Even the hardened security guards wiped their eyes. In that moment, everyone in the International Hotel understood that they had witnessed something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. When the song ended, Elvis hugged Tommy for a long moment, whispering something in his ear that nobody else could hear. Then he walked the boy back to his parents, helping him down the stage steps with the care of a father. The show was over, but the story was just beginning. Subscribe and comment now, because what Elvis did after this performance will show you the true measure of the man behind the legend. After the show, instead of heading to his dressing room as he always did, Elvis went directly to the Harrison family. He spent over an hour with them, not as Elvis the superstar, but as a man who understood that some things matter more than fame. He gave Tommy his personal phone number and promised to call him every week. And he kept that promise. For the next 8 months, until Tommy passed away the following March, Elvis called every Sunday at exactly 3 p.m. They would talk about music, about Tommy's treatments, about dreams and hopes and the strength it takes to face each day. Elvis sent packages filled with records, books, and personal items from his collection. But most importantly, he sent love. Tommy's mother Martha kept a journal during those months, documenting every phone call, every package, every moment of joy that Elvis brought to their son's final year of life. She wrote, "Elvis gave Tommy something more precious than medicine. He gave him dignity, importance, and the knowledge that he mattered to someone the whole world loved. The blue scarf became Tommy's most treasured possession. He wore it to every doctor's appointment, every treatment session, every difficult day. It reminded him that he was brave, that he was loved, and that sometimes miracles really do happen. But the impact of that night reached far beyond one little boy. Word of what Elvis had done spread quickly through the Las Vegas entertainment community. Other performers began reaching out to sick children and their families. The International Hotel started a program connecting entertainers with young fans facing terminal illnesses. Tommy's story inspired what would eventually become the modern Make-A-Wish Foundation celebrity partnerships. Elvis himself was changed by the experience. His future performances had a different quality, a deeper emotional connection with his audience. He began incorporating special moments for children and families dealing with hardship into many of his shows. Those closest to him said that Night with Tommy reminded Elvis why he started singing in the first place, not for fame or money, but to touch people's hearts. When Tommy Harrison passed away on March 12, 1976, he was wearing Elvis's blue scarf. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by Tommy's story and Elvis's kindness. Elvis himself couldn't attend due to touring commitments, but he sent a massive floral arrangement with a note that read, "To the bravest boy I ever knew. Save me a place in heaven. Love, Elvis." But what happened next proved that Elvis's connection to Tommy transcended even death itself. 3 days after the funeral, Martha Harrison received an unexpected phone call. It was Elvis, calling from his hotel room in Memphis. His voice was broken, raw with grief. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, "I need you to know something. Tommy changed my life more than I changed his." Through tears, Elvis told Martha about a dream he'd had the night Tommy died. In the dream, Tommy appeared to him wearing the blue scarf, but he looked healthy, vibrant, completely healed. "Elvis," Dream Tommy had said, "thank you for showing me that love is stronger than sickness. Now I want to show other kids what you showed me." That dream became Elvis's mission for the remaining year and a half of his own life. He established the Tommy Harrison Foundation, in secret, funding medical treatments for children with terminal illnesses. He never publicized it, never sought credit for it. It was his private way of honoring the boy who had reminded him what really mattered. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, Tommy's oncologist, revealed years later that Elvis had personally paid for experimental treatments for 17 other children with leukemia. "We had no idea where the funding was coming from," she said. Medical bills that families couldn't afford were mysteriously taken care of. It wasn't until after Elvis died that we discovered he had been the anonymous benefactor all along. Martha Harrison framed that note, and it hung in her living room until the day she died. She often told visitors, "People think they know Elvis from his movies and his music. But I knew Elvis from his heart. And his heart was bigger than his fame." But perhaps the most incredible part of Tommy's story is what his younger sister discovered 20 years later. The legacy of that night continues to this day. The blue scarf is now in the Country Music Hall of Fame, donated by the Harrison family with a plaque that tells Tommy's story. Every year on July 15th, fans gather at Graceland to remember not just Elvis the entertainer, but Elvis the man who stopped his show to love a dying child. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is what Elvis told his close friend and bodyguard Red West about that night. "Red," Elvis said, "I've sold millions of records, I've made dozens of movies, I've performed for presidents and kings. But nothing I've ever done in my life mattered as much as those few minutes with that little boy. That's when I remembered why God gave me this voice. Not to make me famous, but to make people feel less alone." Share this story and subscribe if you believe that love is the most powerful force in the world. Because sometimes, the greatest performances happen when the music stops and the heart takes over. That night in Las Vegas, Elvis Presley proved that being the king of rock and roll was nothing compared to being a king of human kindness. And in a world that often feels cold and disconnected, we need to remember that the smallest acts of love can create the biggest miracles. Tommy Harrison lived 8 short years, but because of one man's willingness to stop his show and open his heart, those 8 years were filled with more joy and love than many people experience in a lifetime. And Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, became something even greater, a reminder that we all have the power to change someone's world, if we're just brave enough to care.